Hello, I'm Malcolm Hazlitt. We're going to meet one of the first women on South Australian television who is a national treasure. A very special guest in this program is Audrey Stern. It's amazing who you meet in a theatre foyer, and I was so delighted to meet Audrey Stern just last Fringe, and we had a quick chat. Said, you must come and do the program, Audrey. Thank you for coming out and doing this interview.
But I always embarrass my children when I see someone I know from my past.
But so we should. We're all part of a family.
Yes, exactly. And
you have had an illustrious career. You are a national treasure. We don't recognise people enough in this country, sadly, who have actually really set the standard for others to follow.
Well, it is interesting because there's the saying that everybody, stands on somebody else's shoulders. And I was wondering, before my time, what was happening in Adelaide in the theatre, etc.
Not a huge amount, really.
Well, I don't know.
No, there wasn't, to be honest, because I've done a bit of research into that. There was a bit of a bleak time, sort of early 50s, obviously during the war years. But it was just a few that sort of kept it going, kept the light alive, sort of thing.
Well, I think a lot was going on in privately. When I started, when I was about 15, there were we had lots of theatres, lots of people doing amateur theatre.
Yes, there was. But then television came along.
Yes.
And television sort of closed down a lot of the live theatre work. Because people don't sort of understand today, but back then, pre-TV, in South Australia, 1959, people went to the theatre. Most people that lived in the Adelaide city suburbs area went to the theatre often once a week because that was the great entertainment.
And there were concerts.
There was everything. Comedy, a lot of comedy.
A lot of comedy.
And vaudeville.
And the people who were doing that were the ones who later on started teaching. When I started, there were drama classes. We did have some people, I think there was a Ruth Barrett who was a lecturer in speech and drama at Adelaide Uni. So they were around.
They were around,
but we all did elocution. I got my ALCM for elocution when I was 14. So to get that, we had to be trotted out to recite little poems.
Well, do you remember anything that you had to recite at that time?
Yes, The Lady of Shalott.
Yes.
Oh, goodness me.
Can you remember any of the actual dialogue?
The dialogue? No, I remember one when I was about 6, my very first play I was in, and that was about a milkman and a pretty milkmaid, and she was milking the cow, and I think you better stop this. I've got a bit lost.
Don't tell me. No one's going to know what a milkmaid is because milk comes from the fridge now. And that's honestly how things have changed.
Oh, what happened around then too, we had marvellous shows on, like Harry Dearth and
there were the great comedians that George Wallace and
Mo McCackey
doing that.
All those shows. Yep. And I used to sing on one called Radio Canteen, 5DN.
Oh, okay.
Because I started off singing. I wanted to be another Deanna Durbin or Gloria Jean.
Yes.
Because they were my heroes, if you like. And I'd try and sing I Am Titania and warble the top note. But, and I think that was when we were talking about when do things start. And when you reach my age and you look back on your life, I see things that they were meant to be. You feel now that if that hadn't happened, something that happened to me later on, there's a pattern there.
It's finding what's in us to come out, I suppose, and having the opportunity to do it.
That's right.
Finding the people to help us.
But if you'd said to me when I was 6, what did I want to be, I'd probably have said a singer or...
well, that's probably my history too, similar thing, because that was the only thing we were seeing. But you were really one of the first ladies here on local television. How did that come about?
Well, again, that goes back a while. Well, first of all, it actually started when Paul Linkson, who was the program manager at 5DN, rang up because Andrea, who was a woman from Sydney doing a program there, was going on holidays for a fortnight. He said, I don't suppose you'd be able to fill in. And I said, well, I always believe in having a go. I mean, we were all learning. We didn't have any training. And I
No.
thought, well, it'll either work or it won't work.
That's right.
And he said, would you do it for a fortnight? Just fill in. I said, okay. What do you want me to do?
So this was across the road?
This
at
was the
Channel 9?
radio, yes.
Oh, in radio.
This was radio at
Right.
5DN, because 5DN
was
was
just
across the road from Channel 9.
Yes.
And he said, what would you like to do? And I like food, and I like wine, and I like people. And I said, well, I'd like to take people out to lunch and talk to them about something else but what they do. For instance, I know nothing about football, but what if I took a footballer out and hoped that he'd be able to tell me he had some other interests, you know?
Right.
And I did. And I think his name was Darryl Hicks. He was very well known.
He was, yes.
And a lovely, lovely one. And so we went to the Hilton on Green Hill Road, and we talked about the food, and we had wine, and just talked about anything else but football, about which he, you know, knew a lot. So that went to the top of the ratings. And then Rex Heading rang me from Channel 9 across the road and said, oh, don't suppose you'd come over and do a women's program. We've got an hour to spare in the morning in between Humphrey and something else.
Yes.
And I thought, oh, well, I'll have a go. And I tell you, I was so nervous that first day because it was live, of course.
I know. And live television is wonderful because it's everything. If something goes wrong, you've just got to fix it. We've got some shots of you from that around that time. Just have a look at this wonderful woman. Look at her there. This would have been from a play, though, I think.
That was 1968 festival, the recruiting officer. Peter O'Shaughnessy directed that. And that was one of the first plays ever performed in Australia, not that, by convicts.
Oh, right.
And
but not at this time, of course.
No, dear,
that was some time before.
I'm just wondering the thought whether he wanted to do it in 1968 because it was there was a connection, but I don't know what it was.
That's more your early TV face, I would imagine.
Yes. I think I was about 25 then.
And we've got a couple of shots of you. This is Hamlet, I think.
Yes, playing Gertrude.
The Queen.
And Robert Leach was Hamlet. Pammy Weston was Ophelia.
Yes, she's another name from
yes,
local
she was
television.
a Miss Telethon.
Yes.
One stage.
Who are you here in the blue dress?
I'm Melinda in The Recruiting Officer.
Right.
And that was on down at the Union Hall in the university.
Ah, which is no longer there, sadly.
We had so many theatres around then.
And so many people in the cast, which these days is unusual. And you're still in the blue dress there. It's amazing when you look back at some of the early shots of things that we all did when we were young, because a flood of memories come back, don't they?
I know. And when I left school, I went and worked at 5KA as a junior announcer. And who was there but Rex Heading, Lionel Williams. Lionel had a show with Doreen Govett and Bill Davies, Bob
Who became
Moore.
the manager of Channel 9.
No, I worked there until I went nursing. Was my proper job later.
Okay. Yes, because you had to have a proper job then.
I had to have a proper job. So I was working at 5KA until my name came up to start nursing when I was 18, and there was a waiting list then at the RAH, as we called it then. We didn't call it the RA. And I left there, went nursing, but I was acting all the time. I was nurse. I mean, I had my day job as a nurse, and then at night, all those plays we would be doing.
We were younger then.
Yes.
But starting on television must have changed everything, because you would have needed to have been there in the morning because it was live.
Yes, yeah.
So
I mean, that was many years later, you see, after I'd married and had my family.
Right. But when you think about those days, nobody really knew about television then. It was really hit
my
and
mother
miss.
told me that there'd be this magnificent, very clever thing that one day I would be sitting in my lounge watching a film in your own lounge.
Yes,
in your
black
own
and white.
Yes, yes.
Fabulous black and white.
Well, it was black and white.
But suddenly you were looking at cameras in front of you thinking, where am I supposed to look and all of those things.
Mm.
Did anybody actually explain anything to you?
Um, I'm just trying to think.
Because nobody really knew much.
No, I just remember my mother sent me some flowers for my first program when it finished, and that was all terribly exciting. But I don't remember the details. I mean, it's a long time ago, Malcolm.
I understand that. And we're going to take a short break so Audrey can remember the details. We'll be back in a moment. Audrey Stern is my very special guest in this episode of OurTime. Audrey, we were just talking about your women's program on television. I think it was one of the first, if not the first, on Channel 9. It was right back at the very beginning.
Yes.
And they said to you what? What instruction
Well, they just said,
did you
we'd
get?
like you to do a program for women. I think I was filling in between Humphrey B. Bear and something else. I had this little studio. But I was left pretty much to my own devices. I had a little office.
But they wanted you to do something that women would
like. Yes.
But
So
they
I
expected that would be a
started
cooking
what
recipe,
yes, more
fashion.
when I think they thought the women sat round in candlewick dressing gowns and curlers watching Days of Our Dreary Lives. You know. And I didn't want to have ads on it. I didn't want to have people selling things. I wanted it to be interesting. So I got up early and read the paper every morning, and I had a few politicians on. I had Max Harris, I had Germaine Greer, and that was interesting because Germaine, of course, was spouting on about women should be doing more interesting things and not just being personal slaves to men. And she said things like women should be not just doing nursing and teaching. And I said, now hang on, what's the matter with nursing and teaching? They're wonderful professions. I don't regret doing nursing at all. But to me, they were complementary. The nursing, you're learning about people, you're observing, and observation is a very important thing to have with acting. And so she sort of looked at me and I said, I bet you had a teacher whom you remember. And
who set her on the course that she took, I would imagine.
Yes, well, she is. She's an Oxford Don or
Exactly.
a Cambridge Don.
Yes.
And
it's interesting because you mentioned Humphrey, and in the early days when I was doing that program, we had a lot of people that were trying to literally change the way children were brought up, that there was no male or female, things weren't related to a male or to a female. They were
androgynous.
just for children, yeah. The point was it swung a little bit too far, and I've often joked about I would be making clothes or sewing or making food, and the girl on the show would be out fixing the fence or changing the oil in the car. And whilst all that was fine, because I did all of that anyway, I cooked for myself, cleaned for myself, repaired things for myself, didn't make any difference to me. But I just felt, you know, there are also kids that want to go in that way too, you know, to do the manly or the feminine things, if there is such a thing.
well, I think women bear the children, and I don't think you can alter that very much. And
No.
because of that, I think you are more nurturing as a woman. You do feel that's the ultimate responsibility, really bringing up children.
It's times in your life, though, don't you
Yes.
think? It's the different things that happen with, whether it's childbirth or...
Oh, it's a completely different world
everything,
now.
and it is absolutely different. Everyone can work now, and everyone can be...
We were in the beginning of this women's liberation feminist thing, and it's almost as if it's got to the stage where you've got to hate men if you're a feminist. And I don't believe that. I've met some lovely men. And I think it's all just gone. You can't alter history. You can't alter the fact that we are male and female.
But again, people like Germaine were pushing the envelope to try and get people to think about these
she
things.
made a lot of difference.
And she did.
Yes.
She absolutely did.
But I was walking along the corridor afterwards, and the assistant manager was in front of me, and he slammed the door in my face. And I said, well, sorry about that, Rick. If I'd been in front of you, I would have held the door open. It's called manners.
I know who you're talking about. Audrey, but you've done also quite a lot of film and television work as well.
Yeah.
And you've also been a vocal coach to people to pure their accent. Look, I keep looking at this DVD
Hunter.
that's here of Hunter.
Oh, my
Now,
goodness.
this is one of the original or not one
Black
of the
and white.
original ones, but it was a black and white, because there were all the Crawford shows in these days that made programs like this.
Well, it's interesting. I remember Dorothy Crawford particularly well, very fondly, because we would be sent our scripts, and I got a note from her saying that I was going to be in the Tolhurst file and I would need a pair of shoes, neutral shoes. If I needed to buy, if I didn't have a pair of my own, if I needed to buy one, if I didn't want to keep them, could I not buy a very expensive pair? So I guess that money was not.
There was no money in those
certainly was
days.
no money.
And you looked at some of the sets and they were paper thin.
And now, when you look at the very explicit sex scenes that you see, well, you know, most television you see now, it's got language, violence, and sex scenes.
Up first,
Hello.
yes.
And I was doing the scene. Gerard Kennedy was the baddie, and I can't quite remember what it was. The details were, but I had to take my dress off and be in a slip. I think he was about to have his evil way with me or something.
Okay.
And one of the cameramen whistled.
When you took
And
off.
Dorothy stopped. She said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, Audrey. Would you like a closed set?" And I mean, my slip would have been what people would wear for a dress now.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. And a lot less at the beach.
And it was all left more to the imagination. I mean, now everything's in your face. And I mean, I think that's a change.
Well,
I
it's
could
about
do without.
language too, Audrey.
Yes.
We've become very lazy with the way that we speak, and sometimes it's really difficult to understand what people
I
are
put
saying.
the subtitles on something I was watching the other night.
Oh, okay.
I think it was
That's
Last
old
Tango
age.
in
We're all
Halifax
going
or
deaf.
something. Yes.
We're all going deaf. That's the trouble. No, but you've done quite a lot of speech coaching. Did that come from the elocution originally?
Yes. Well, ostensibly, once you get your ALCM, you are entitled to teach.
Right.
But I was quite young when I got mine, and it just came in handy later on. And also, having done so much acting, and a lot of the directors, for instance, Colin Ballantyne, Frankie Flanagan, John Edmund, would insist that you did your diaphragmatic breathing.
Of course.
And that you projected, darling.
Of course. Well, you don't have to now because we've all got little
No,
microphones.
they've got
yes. So
and
it makes it easier.
You don't hear all these. And in the theatre, particularly, I think you do need voices.
You need clarity of speech. I teach all of that too. And I think it's a shame because T's and D's have become the same sound. So kids will say, "I want some water." I say, "Well, you're going to jail to find the water, are you?"
That's been around for a long time.
Of course it has.
And
but it does change the meaning of what you're talking about.
Of course it does.
Look, we've got some other shots here of programs of shows, and you've been in probably hundreds of them, I would imagine.
Yes, I've been in a lot.
These are just a small selection.
Yeah.
The importance of being earnest. I hope that's not your legs.
Lady Bracknell.
Of course. What's the one sideways? A Delicate Balance.
A Delicate Balance. That's a play I never really understood.
Well, you just
Someone
say the
asked
words
me what
and
was my
face the
favourite
front.
play, and I said I'd have to say Rosalind and As You Like It, which was one of the first ones I did.
What was Simon and Laura?
Simon and Laura, that was about a husband and wife who were a television couple.
There you go.
I think they call them power couples
Because
now.
they're there. And here's the man that came to dinner.
Yes.
And I'm amused with this because it is at the theatre that we now call theatres,
Well, we did
Star
a lot
Theatres.
at Theatre 62.
This is at Theatre 62,
Yeah.
which came into being in 1962. That's why it was called Theatre 62.
Well, it was
There
a
you go.
lovely theatre.
Quite different now. But Audrey, you did a lot of films as well. So you did quite a few TV guest spots.
Hunter and Homicide, The Fourth Wish.
Yes.
Um,
Sometimes it's hard.
did a lot of documentaries.
Yes. As a voiceover person?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you name it. I think I've had a double at it.
When you look back at your life, were there highlights? Were there things that sort of go, bang, I'm so glad that happened?
Yes. Well, people. I found that a lot of things I've done, somebody's instigated it. For instance, with acting, when I started acting when I did As You Like It, I was 18. In 1951, work that out.
A baby.
And
28.
I was walking along King William Street with a friend, and she said, you wouldn't want to come to some acting classes with me. I'm going out to Gwyneth Ballantyne's acting classes. And I thought, well, why not? So I started, and I went, and Teddy Hodgman was there, I think Dennis Olsen. And
these are all very famous names from our state theatre company here in Adelaide.
And I did a few classes, and Gwyneth came up one night and she said, oh, I've got something that might interest you. I wondered if you might be available to do a play my husband's doing As You Like It. Do you know it? And I said, no, I don't. And she said, well, would you like to read it? Well, he came and talked to me and asked me what I'd done. And I think when I said I'd done elocution, he didn't have a very sort of positive look on his face. It was becoming a dirty word, I think. And that happens. Fashions change.
Yes, they do. That's
and
true.
Standards that we had, posh or whatever.
I love your story about going to a casting session and being told that you had a North Adelaide accent, and you said...
And I said I'd never lived in North Adelaide. And that was a Sydney person.
Yes.
And another one, I did a book reading for the ABC. That was something else that people did. And he was from Queensland, the producer. And he said, oh, you've got a phony accent. And I said, well, I don't know what you mean by a phony accent. Adelaide is historically English. It was a free settle.
It was, yes.
And we lived in a little Victorian town in Adelaide,
yeah.
and we learnt English at school.
Well, Audrey, I'm sorry, but we've just got to take a bit of a break here. So if you just sit there like a good old bird, and we'll be back in a moment. Audrey Stern is about to tell us some more of the highlights of her life, which you said before was really people.
Yeah, I love people. Well, I like interesting people, but a lot of them have helped me. I haven't chased some things. I haven't chased up. Someone has rung me and said, oh, I don't suppose you would do this. Rob Crozer did it with the Independent Theatre, for instance. There's a network and people get to know you.
Once you're known, yes.
Yes, and they're awfully kind. And with radio plays, how I got into radio was through a lovely woman who was involved, and she rang me and said, I've just made an appointment for you to go and see Stafford Dyson at the ABC. And that was in Hindmarsh Square, just around the corner from the Royal Adelaide Hospital. So I would throw a coat over my uniform and race round to the ABC and do a play. And one patient said when I came back, we did The Master Builder, Henrik Ibsen. The last line was, my master builder, which was supposed to be orgasmic or something. And this darling man, one of my patients, said, just heard you on the radio, nurse. What was all the shouting about at the end? I mean, that brings you right down to earth, doesn't it?
It does. But the immediacy in those days when everything was live.
Yes, yes.
I miss those days. Do you?
Well, I haven't. I'm not part of it anymore. So.
Well,
but
because it's closer to what happens on stage, I guess. You know, you only see it once. It only ever is going to happen that way once.
No, it's probably why people get panic attacks.
I guess so. Yes.
Because.
Can you wrap up your life in one sentence? Do you think?
Could I? Oh. I've been very, very lucky. I'm a very fortunate woman.
I love that.
And I have a lot of love in my life.
Because of your family?
Yes.
What have you got?
I have I have a son and 2 daughters, and 5 grandchildren, and 1 little great-granddaughter called Ava, who's an absolute joy.
And
a happy little birdie, yes.
So you can have it all, can't you?
Well, we've travelled a lot. How I met my husband was in casualty at the Adelaide. He's a paediatrician, and that's a family joke.
We're just going to keep talking, but thanks for being with us on this time. Keep yourself nice till next time we meet.